My name is Olivia Harper, and I was standing on my father's porch on Christmas Eve, a wrapped gift in my hands, when the door opened and my whole world tilted sideways. Richard looked at me the way you look at a salesman who showed up uninvited. No smile, no step aside, just a flat, tired voice that said, "Olivia, Emily doesn't want you here tonight. Go home. Don't ruin the mood." I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. The door closed before I could find the words. Not a slam. Worse, a quiet, deliberate click, like I wasn't even worth the energy of anger. Through the frosted glass panel beside the door, I could see them. The dining table glowing with candles, Karen laughing at something, cousins passing dishes, and Emily, my half-sister, turning to look right at me through that glass. She smiled, slow, satisfied, victorious. Behind me, Christmas lights blinked on the neighbor's roof. Inside, someone said, "Finally, we can relax." Karen's voice. I recognized the relief in it, the relief that I was gone. I don't know how long I stood there, long enough for my fingers to go numb around the gift I'd spent 2 weeks choosing. A cashmere scarf, soft gray, the kind of thing I thought Karen might actually like. Stupid. I was 35 years old, and still bringing offerings to people who saw me as an inconvenience. I walked back to my car, and every step felt like wading through concrete. The neighborhood was alive with holiday joy, lights in every window, a family across the street waving at someone pulling into their driveway, a golden retriever wearing antlers. Normal Christmas scenes that suddenly felt like a language I didn't speak. I got into my car and just sat there, didn't start the engine, didn't cry, just stared at the wrapped gift on the passenger seat and wondered why I kept doing this to myself. 23 years of trying to belong to a family that kept finding new ways to remind me I didn't. The heater hadn't kicked in yet, and the cold seeped through my coat. I thought about my mother. I always thought about my mother when things got bad. Catherine Harper died when I was 12. Cancer, the kind that moves fast and takes everything. Emily was only 5 then, too young to really remember her. But I remembered. I remembered her hands, always warm, her laugh, always easy, the way she'd brush my hair at night and tell me I was braver than I knew. 3 months before she died, she pressed something into my palm. A pearl necklace, simple, elegant, the only valuable thing she owned. "This was my mother's," she said, "and her mother's before. Someday it'll remind you where you come from." I was wearing it now, tucked under my coat where no one could see. Karen never liked when I wore it, said it was showing off. So I learned to hide it. To hide the one piece of my mother I had left. I started the car and pulled away from Maple Ridge Drive without looking back. Charlotte was beautiful that night, I'll give it that. Lights strung across trees, wreaths on doors, families visible through windows doing all the things families do at Christmas. I drove through it like a ghost, seeing everything, feeling nothing. The radio came on automatically. "I'll be home for Christmas." I turned it off so fast I nearly swerved. Here's the thing about me, I'm a senior financial analyst. I work at a regional bank, and my job is to spot fraud. Inconsistencies, red flags, I'm good at it. I've saved clients hundreds of thousands of dollars by catching what other people missed. At work, I'm trusted, respected. The person they call when something doesn't add up. But with my family, I'd spent 2 decades ignoring every red flag they planted. Funny how you can be so clear-eyed about strangers and so blind about the people who are supposed to love you. I got back to my apartment around 8. It's nothing fancy. 1 bedroom, small kitchen, a living room with a window that looks out at the parking lot. But it's mine. I decorated for Christmas because I always did. A little tree with white lights, a wreath I got on sale, stockings hung on a tension rod because I don't have a fireplace. Walking in that night, the decorations just made the emptiness louder. I set Karen's gift on the counter, poured myself a glass of wine, then put it back without drinking it. I didn't want to numb this, I wanted to understand it. I changed into pajamas and sat on my couch in the dark, just the tree lights blinking. On my bookshelf, there's a photo of my mother holding me when I was maybe 7, both of us smiling, real smiles, the kind that reach your eyes. I picked it up and studied her face, wondered what she'd say about tonight, about all of it. She'd been gone 23 years, and I still missed her like it was yesterday. When she died, everything changed. Dad remarried Karen within 2 years. Karen, who smiled at Dad and froze when she looked at me, who made sure Emily had everything while I learned to make do with less. Emily became the new daughter. I became the reminder of a life Richard wanted to forget. I thought about all the times I'd been pushed aside. My middle school graduation that Dad missed because Karen scheduled Emily's dance recital on the same day. The family vacation to Florida I wasn't invited to because there was limited space. The Thanksgiving 3 years ago when I was uninvited at the last minute because Emily said I made her feel judged. Every time I forgave them, every time I came back, every time they took a little more and gave a little less. Maybe the problem wasn't that I kept failing to earn their love. Maybe the problem was that their love was never available to earn. Around 11, my phone buzzed. I'd been ignoring it for hours, but curiosity won. A group text from the family Christmas I wasn't part of. Photos. The dinner table, everyone smiling. Emily holding up a gift, beaming, Karen kissing Dad's cheek by the tree. The caption from Emily: "Perfect Christmas with the people who matter most." I wasn't in a single photo, erased completely. They weren't sad I was gone, they were celebrating it. I muted the chat, put my phone face down, stared at the ceiling until my eyes burned. Tomorrow is Christmas Day, I told myself. I'll wake up alone. And maybe that's better than being at a table where I don't exist. Christmas morning came gray and cold. I woke before my alarm, made coffee I didn't taste, and moved through the apartment like a sleepwalker. My phone sat on the kitchen counter where I'd left it. I expected another group text, more photos of the family I'd been exiled from. I almost didn't look, but then it buzzed, and habit made me reach for it. It wasn't a text. It was an automated notification from my credit monitoring app. The subject line made my stomach drop. Alert, significant change to your credit report. I opened it. Coffee cup frozen halfway to my lips. Your credit score has decreased by 127 points. New account activity detected. 127 points. That doesn't happen from a missed payment. That doesn't happen from a small mistake. That happens when something is very, very wrong. I set down my coffee with shaking hands and opened my full credit report. And what I saw there changed everything. The numbers on my screen didn't make sense. I scrolled through my credit report 3 times, certain I was misreading something. But the information stayed the same, black text on white background, impossible to misunderstand. New account opened. Personal loan, $21,000. Lender, South Trust Financial Services. Account type, co-signer. Primary borrower, Emily Rose Harper. Date opened, August 15th. Status, delinquent. 2 missed payments. I read it again. And again, Emily Rose Harper, my half-sister. The same Emily who smiled at me through the frosted glass last night while our father closed the door in my face. The same Emily whose Christmas caption said, "The people who matter most." She had taken out a $21,000 loan with me as the co-signer, and I had never signed anything. I had never agreed to anything. I hadn't even spoken to Emily about money in years. But there was my name, my social security number, my employer, my address. Everything correct except one thing. My consent. I grabbed my phone and called South Trust Financial immediately. An automated message answered. "Thank you for calling South Trust Financial Services. Our offices are closed for the Christmas holiday. Normal business hours will resume December 26th. I tried again. And again. Looking for an emergency line, a fraud department, anyone. Nothing. The whole financial system was shut down for Christmas, and I was trapped in limbo knowing something was very wrong but unable to do anything about it. I called my own bank's fraud department next. Christmas Day meant reduced staff and longer hold times. I sat on hold for 43 minutes, listening to tinny Christmas carols that felt like mockery. When I finally reached someone, they could only flag my account for monitoring. They couldn't investigate an external loan. You'll need to file a dispute directly with the lender and the credit bureaus, the representative said. And ma'am, I'd recommend checking for any other suspicious activity. Sometimes these things aren't isolated. Her words hung in the air after I hung up. Sometimes these things aren't isolated. What else had they done? I sat at my small desk and opened my laptop. If the banks couldn't help me today, I'd help myself. This was what I did for a living after all. I pulled up all 3 credit bureau reports: Experian, Equifax, TransUnion. The $21,000 loan appeared on all of them. The address associated with the application was 4712 Maple Ridge Drive, my father's house. The employment listed was my actual employer, my actual position. But the contact email caught my attention. olivia.harper.financial@gmail.com. That wasn't my email. Someone had created a fake email address using my name. I searched my real email for anything from South Trust Financial, found one message from 4 months ago, buried in my spam folder. Subject line: Your co-signer application has been approved. I had never seen it because spam filters caught it. But wait, I never applied for anything. So why would South Trust send a confirmation to my real email at all? I stared at the screen, pieces clicking into place. Someone applied using the fake email but must have listed my real email as a secondary contact, a backup, a mistake the fraudster didn't anticipate, or maybe a standard verification step they couldn't avoid. Either way, there was a trail. And then a memory surfaced. Sharp and unwelcome. 6 months ago, late June. Karen had called me, which was unusual. Karen never called unless she needed something. Her voice had been warm that day, almost friendly, which should have been my first warning. Olivia, honey, we need a small favor. Emily's trying to build her credit, open a savings account at a new bank. They need a family member's information for verification. Just routine paperwork. I had hesitated. Something felt off. But then Karen's voice had turned wounded. Don't you trust your own family? It's just paperwork. Emily's trying to be responsible for once. I thought you'd want to support that. And because I always wanted to believe they might finally accept me, I gave in. I gave her my social security number, my date of birth, my current address. Everything she asked for, wrapped in family guilt and handed over like a gift. I had given them the keys to my identity. I felt sick. The coffee I'd made that morning churned in my stomach. This wasn't random identity theft by some stranger on the internet. This was family, my stepmother, my sister, using the information I'd trusted them with to take out a loan I never agreed to, and now I was liable for $21,000 because Emily had stopped making payments. 2 months delinquent. Collection proceedings pending. My credit score, which I'd carefully built to 785 over years of discipline, was now 658. I was planning to buy a condo next year. That dream was dead now. My job required periodic credit checks. This could raise red flags with my employer. My professional reputation depended on financial integrity, and they had taken that too. I went back to the loan application, looking for more details. The purpose listed was home improvement and personal expenses. 2 payments had been made in September and October. Then nothing. November and December missed completely. If Emily defaulted entirely, I was responsible for the full amount. Plus interest, plus fees, plus the damage already done. I did the math with shaking hands. If this went to collections, it would follow me for 7 years. 7 years of explaining. 7 years of being punished for trusting the wrong people. I found a link to view the original application. A scanned PDF loaded on my screen, the application form filled out with my information, my name typed neatly in every field, and at the bottom a signature line, co-signer signature, Olivia C. Harper. The signature was there, a reasonable imitation of my handwriting, but I knew my own signature, the way I loop my O, the sharp angle of my H, the slight flourish on my final R. This was close, but it was wrong. Someone had studied my signature and forged it. This wasn't carelessness or miscommunication. This was deliberate, calculated fraud. And someone in my family, maybe multiple someones, had planned it, I sat back in my chair, mind racing. The snow that had started falling outside my window was heavier now. The world was white and quiet, a picture perfect Christmas morning. Inside my apartment, the Christmas tree lights blinked on and off, cheerful and obscene given what I'd just discovered. I thought about the timing. Christmas Eve, I was publicly humiliated and removed from the family dinner. Christmas Day, I discovered the fraud. Were they connected? Had they kicked me out because they knew the credit alert would come? Were they trying to cut me off before I could ask questions at the dinner table? The exclusion suddenly felt less like cruelty and more like strategy. They wanted me gone before I found out. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I hadn't seen in months. Aunt Margaret, my mother's older sister. The only person from Mom's side of the family who still kept in touch, even though I'd been terrible about staying connected. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart. I heard you weren't at Richard's last night. Are you okay?" I stared at the message. Margaret had always been suspicious of Karen, had always asked careful questions about how I was being treated. I started to type a polite response, something vague and reassuring. Then I stopped. Margaret knew my mother. Margaret might know things about my family that I didn't. And right now, I needed answers more than I needed to pretend everything was fine. I deleted what I'd written and typed something different. "Can we talk? Not about Christmas. About something else. Something about Mom." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. My heart pounded while I waited. Finally, her response came through. "I've been waiting for you to ask. Come over tomorrow. There's something you need to know." Something about Mom. What else had this family been hiding? December 26th came slowly. I barely slept, lying awake most of the night staring at the ceiling, Aunt Margaret's text echoing in my mind. "Something you need to know. But first things first." The bank opened at 9, and I intended to be there the moment the doors unlocked. I showered and dressed with deliberate care. Black slacks, white blouse, my good wool coat. Professional, put together, armor for battle. I gathered everything I might need, printed copies of my credit reports, the loan application with the forged signature, my real ID, proof of address, bank statements. I organized it all in a folder the way I would for a client at work. If I was going to fight this, I was going to fight it like the professional I was, not like a victim begging for help. The pearl necklace went on last. I tucked it under my collar where it would rest against my skin, invisible but present. My mother's strength, close to my heart. I needed it today. South Trust Financial Services, Ballantine Branch. The building was modern glass and steel, corporate Christmas decorations still hanging in the windows, wreaths with red bows, a tree in the lobby blinking with white lights. I arrived at 9:05, one of the first customers through the door. The normalcy of the place felt surreal. People depositing checks, a young couple opening a joint account, an elderly man asking about interest rates, and me walking up to the reception desk to report that my own family had committed a crime against me. I asked to speak with a manager about a fraud concern. The receptionist's expression shifted immediately. Fraud isn't a casual word in a bank. She made a quick call, then directed me to a private office in the back. I followed her down a carpeted hallway, past framed photos of community events and employee awards, into a small room with a desk, 2 chairs, and a window overlooking the parking lot. Janet Morrison, Branch Operations Manager. That's what the nameplate said. She was mid-50s with reading glasses and kind but professional eyes. A family photo sat on her desk. Husband, grown kids, a golden retriever on a beach. Normal life. Normal family. Everything I didn't have. She listened as I explained the situation. A loan I never signed. My identity used without my permission. A forged signature. As I spoke, her face grew more serious. When I finished, she turned to her computer and started typing. "Let me pull up your file," she said. "Give me just a moment." I watched her scroll through screens, her frown deepening with each click. Finally, she picked up her phone and called someone in records. Spoke in a low voice I couldn't quite hear. When she hung up, she turned her monitor so I could see it. The loan application filled the screen. Application date: August 15th. Submitted in person at the Pineville branch, a different location than this one. Primary borrower: Emily Rose Harper. Cosigner: Olivia Catherine Harper. Documents provided included a photocopy of my driver's license, a signed application, and email confirmation. Janet's voice was careful when she spoke. "Miss Harper, did you submit this application in person?" I shook my head. "No, I've never been to your Pineville branch." "Did you authorize anyone to act on your behalf?" "No." "Is this your signature?" She zoomed in on the signature line. I stared at it, that imitation of my handwriting, close but wrong in ways only I would notice. "No," I said. "That's not my signature. Someone forged it." Janet removed her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. "I was afraid you'd say that." I looked at her. "This isn't the first time you've seen something like this?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "Family fraud is more common than people think. I'm sorry you're going through this." Family fraud. There was a name for what they'd done, a category, a pattern. I wasn't the first person to sit in this chair and discover that the people who were supposed to love them had stolen from them instead. Janet made another call, this time to the Pineville branch. She requested security footage from August 15th. 20 minutes of waiting while files transferred. I sat rigid in my chair, folder clutched in my lap, watching the clock on the wall tick away seconds that felt like hours. Finally, Janet turned her monitor toward me again. Grainy security footage. Timestamp: August 15th, 2:34 in the afternoon. The Pineville branch lobby. A woman approached the teller window. Mid-50s. Brown hair styled carefully, reading glasses, a cream-colored blouse. She was carrying a folder and smiling politely at the teller. She slid documents across the counter with the confidence of someone who had done nothing wrong. I knew that posture, that performative elegance, that practiced smile. Karen. My stepmother had walked into a bank, pretended to be helping me, and forged my name on a $21,000 loan. Janet paused the footage. "Do you recognize this person?" My voice was steady, even though my hands weren't. "That's my stepmother, Karen Harper." Janet captured a still frame and printed it. "I'll need to document this. And Miss Harper, I have to tell you, this is now a criminal matter." Criminal matter. Not a family disagreement, not a misunderstanding. My stepmother had committed a crime, and it was captured on camera. Janet explained what I needed to do next. File a police report to document the crime officially. File an FTC identity theft affidavit, Form 14039. Dispute the account with all 3 credit bureaus. Send a fraud affidavit directly to South Trust. Once they had the police report, they could freeze the account and begin their internal investigation. The process could take 30 to 90 days. During that time, I wouldn't be responsible for payments if I could prove fraud. "The footage helps," Janet said. "The forged signature helps. This is one of the clearer cases I've seen." She lowered her voice then, leaning forward slightly. "Honey, I've been doing this for 22 years. Family fraud is the hardest kind. People think because it's family they can't report it. Or they shouldn't. But fraud is fraud, and you have every right to protect yourself." She slid her business card across the desk. "My direct line, if you need anything." A stranger showing me more support than my family ever had. I tucked the card into my folder like a lifeline. I was about to stand when Janet paused, looking at her screen again. "Miss Harper, I should mention something else. When I pulled your information, I noticed additional irregularities." My stomach dropped. "What kind of irregularities?" She pulled up another screen. "There are 3 credit card accounts opened in your name over the past 2 years. 2 with Capital One, 1 with Discover. Combined balance approximately $8,500. Did you open these accounts?" I hadn't. Of course I hadn't. The addresses were all linked to my father's house on Maple Ridge Drive. The cards had been maxed out within months of opening. I stared at the numbers, doing the math in my head. $21,000 loan, $8,500 in credit cards, nearly $30,000 stolen under my name. My credit destroyed, my identity weaponized. And this wasn't one desperate act. This was systematic. They'd been using me for years. I left South Trust with a folder twice as thick as when I'd arrived. Printouts, forms, Janet's card, evidence of a betrayal so complete it took my breath away. I sat in my car in the parking lot, hands on the steering wheel, trying to process what I'd learned. $30,000. 2 years of fraud. Karen on camera. Emily as primary beneficiary. My father's address on every application. Did Richard know? He had to know. How could he not notice credit cards arriving at his house? How could he not know Karen was going to banks with my documents? Unless he chose not to see. Unless he was part of it. I started the car but didn't drive home. I drove toward Aunt Margaret's house instead. Because whatever Margaret knew about my mother might explain how this family became capable of this. Her house was a modest brick ranch in a quiet neighborhood. Christmas wreath still on the door. I hadn't been here in months, too busy trying to earn love from people who had none to give. Margaret opened the door before I could knock. 73 years old, silver hair, my mother's eyes looking back at me. Her expression was equal parts relief and sorrow. "You found out about the loan, didn't you?" she asked. I blinked. "You knew?" She shook her head slowly. "Not about the loan, but I knew they were taking from you. Come inside, sweetheart." She stepped back, holding the door open. "There's more. There's always been more." I followed her into the warmth of her kitchen, heart pounding. "It starts with your mother," Margaret said softly, "and a trust fund you were never supposed to know about." Aunt Margaret's house smelled like cinnamon and old books. The kitchen was warm and cluttered with life, the kind of space that felt lived in rather than staged. A cat slept on a chair by the window. Family photos lined every available surface, and I found myself staring at them as Margaret put the kettle on. Photos of my mother, Catherine laughing at a picnic, Catherine in a graduation gown, Catherine holding a newborn me, exhaustion and joy mixed on her face. Photos that didn't exist at my father's house anymore. Karen had made sure of that. Margaret guided me to the kitchen table, set a cup of tea in front of me, and sat down across with a worn manila envelope in her hands. The edges were soft with age. My mother's handwriting was on the front. "For Olivia, legal documents." I stared at those words, written by hands that had been still for 23 years, and felt something crack open in my chest. "Your mother knew she was dying," Margaret said softly. "She had 8 months from diagnosis to the end. She spent those months making sure you'd be taken care of." She paused, fingers resting on the envelope. She didn't trust Richard completely. She loved him, but she knew his weakness. I looked up. What weakness? Margaret's eyes were sad. He always took the path of least resistance. Whoever pushed hardest, won. And your mother knew that after she was gone, someone else would be doing the pushing. She slid a document across the table. A copy of my mother's will, dated 3 months before her death. I picked it up with trembling hands and started reading. Legal language, formal and precise, until I reached Section 4. "I hereby establish a trust in the amount of $45,000 for my daughter, Olivia Catherine Harper, to be held until her 25th birthday, at which time the full amount shall be disbursed to her. Trustee, Richard Allen Harper." I read it twice, 3 times. $45,000. I turned 25 10 years ago. I never received a penny. "I asked Dad about this," I said, my voice strange in my own ears. "When I turned 25, I asked if Mom left me anything. He said there was nothing. He said the medical bills took everything." Margaret's jaw tightened. "That's a lie. Your mother had life insurance. The medical bills were covered. That $45,000 was separate. It came from your grandmother's estate, passed to Catherine, designated specifically for you." She leaned forward. "Richard knew. He's always known. The room felt like it was tilting. 10 years. For 10 years I had believed my mother died leaving nothing behind. That the cancer had taken not just her life, but any legacy she might have left. And all that time, the money she meant for me had been sitting somewhere, stolen by the people who were supposed to be my family. Where did it go? I asked. If the trust existed, where did the money go? Margaret pulled out a handwritten timeline she'd kept over the years. I've wondered that for a decade. When you turned 25, I asked Richard about the trust. He got defensive, said it was none of my business. We barely spoke after that. She traced a finger down the page. But I have my suspicions. The year you turned 25, Karen convinced Richard to invest in Emily's first business venture, an event planning company. It failed within 18 months. She pointed to another entry. 2 years later, Emily's second venture, a boutique, that failed too. She looked up at me. Every time Emily needed money, Richard found it somewhere. I always wondered if somewhere was your inheritance. The pattern clicked into place with sickening clarity. They hadn't just stolen from me recently. They'd been stealing from me for a decade. My mother's money, meant to give me a foundation, had been funneled into Emily's failures. I thought about all the times I'd struggled in my 20s, working 2 jobs to pay for grad school, driving a car that broke down every other month, eating ramen for weeks because rent was due. And all that time, $45,000 with my name on it was being spent on Emily's dreams while mine went unfunded. Margaret reached back into the envelope. More papers, yellowed with age. I kept everything I could, she said. Your mother's will, the trust establishment documents, a letter from the bank confirming the trust balance as of your mother's death. $45,247.63. She pulled out one more item. A Christmas card, old and faded with Richard's handwriting inside. I took it carefully, almost afraid to read it. Thank you for not making this difficult. The money will help Emily get on her feet. Olivia doesn't need to know. I read those words 3 times. Olivia doesn't need to know. My father had written that. He had thanked Margaret for staying silent, for being complicit. Except Margaret had never agreed to stay silent. She had just assumed, wrongly, that I already knew and had chosen to help Emily myself. I should have told you years ago, Margaret said, her voice thick with regret. I thought maybe Richard had given you the money quietly. Maybe you just didn't tell me. When you never mentioned it, I assumed you knew and had made peace with helping your sister. She shook her head. I was wrong. I should have asked you directly. I'm sorry. I didn't blame her. She had been lied to as well, manipulated into believing I was complicit in my own robbery. The real villain was Richard, who had used everyone's assumptions to cover his theft. I had to ask the question that had haunted me for 23 years. Why does Karen hate me so much? What did I ever do to her? Margaret sighed, setting down her tea. Karen knew about the trust from the beginning. Richard told her when they were dating. She saw you as a threat from day one, Catherine's daughter with Catherine's inheritance. A constant reminder that Richard had a whole life before her. She paused. But more than that, she saw that money as hers, her family's. In Karen's mind, anything Richard had should go to Emily. You were competition. She spent years turning Emily against you, Margaret continued. Told Emily that you were the favored daughter because Catherine left you money. Made Emily believe you were rich and privileged while she struggled. She shook her head. The irony is, you never had the money, but Emily grew up resenting you for something you never received. Karen manufactured a rivalry based on a lie, and Emily became a weapon against you. I sat back, overwhelmed. The full scope of the betrayal was staggering. Age 12, my mother dies, and the trust is established. Age 25, the trust should have been dispersed, but Richard lies and gives the money to Emily's business. Age 33, Karen obtains my social security number through manipulation. Age 35, a $21,000 loan is forged in my name, plus $8,500 in credit cards over 2 years. Total stolen, approximately $75,000 of value. This family had been using me as a resource for over a decade. First my inheritance, then my credit, then my identity. And when I showed up at Christmas hoping to be included, they kicked me out because I was no longer useful in person, only on paper. Margaret reached across the table and took my hand. "What are you going to do?" I looked at the documents spread between us. My mother's will, the bank confirmation, Richard's damning Christmas card. Evidence of a decade of theft. "I've already started," I said. "I went to the bank this morning. They have Karen on camera submitting the forged loan. I'm filing a police report, an FTC affidavit. I'm going to clear my name." Margaret nodded slowly. "And the trust fund?" I met her eyes. "I'm going to get that back too. I need a lawyer, a real one, someone who handles fraud and estate disputes." Margaret wrote down a name and number on a slip of paper. "David Chen. He handled my husband's estate. He's good and he's honest. Tell him I sent you. Tell him everything." I tucked the paper into my folder, another piece of armor for the battle ahead. I gathered the documents Margaret had given me, evidence that would have changed my life if I'd known about it years ago. At the door, I hugged her longer than I had in years. "Your mother would be proud of you," she said quietly. "She always said you were the strong one. Don't let them make you feel guilty for protecting yourself." She paused, her expression serious. "And Olivia, be careful. Karen doesn't lose gracefully." I sat in my car outside Margaret's house, engine running, heat blasting against the December cold. My phone buzzed, a text from Richard sent from a new number since I'd blocked his old one. "Olivia, we need to talk. Karen told me you went to the bank. This is all a misunderstanding. Call me." I stared at the word misunderstanding. $45,000, $29,000 more, my name, my credit, my identity, misunderstanding. I didn't call. Instead, I typed back one line. "Talk to my lawyer." Then I pulled out of the driveway and headed for the police station. The Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department smelled like stale coffee and floor cleaner. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a flat, institutional glow. I sat on a plastic chair in the waiting area, my folder of evidence balanced on my knees, watching officers move through the space with the tired efficiency of people who'd seen too much to be surprised by anything. When they called my name, I was directed to a desk in the back corner where Officer Denise Watkins waited. She was middle-aged with no-nonsense eyes and fingers that moved quickly across her keyboard as I told my story. I presented everything: the loan, the forged signature, the documentation Janet had given me at the bank, the credit cards opened without my knowledge. Officer Watkins listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding, occasionally asking me to clarify a date or a name. When I finished, she looked at me with something that might have been sympathy. "Ma'am, this is a clear case of identity theft and forgery. The bank footage is particularly helpful. Most cases don't have that kind of evidence." She typed something, then handed me a case number and a victim's rights pamphlet. "We'll assign a detective from financial crimes. You should hear from them within a week." I was about to stand when she added one more thing. "One question. Do you have reason to believe the suspects know you're filing this report?" I thought about Richard's text. "Karen told me you went to the bank." My father texted me an hour ago. He knows I went to the bank. Officer Watkins paused, her expression careful. "Be careful. Financial crimes involving family can escalate. Document everything. Don't meet with them alone." Her words stayed with me as I walked back to my car. Escalate. Like this wasn't already bad enough. David Chen's law office was in Dilworth, a converted Victorian house with a wraparound porch and a small parking lot tucked behind it. Inside, the space was professional but warm. Framed diplomas on the walls, leather chairs, a fern by the window that looked like someone actually remembered to water it. I sat in the waiting room for 10 minutes, folder in my lap, rehearsing what I would say. Then the door opened and David Chen appeared. He was early 50s with silver at his temples and a calm presence that felt deliberate, like he'd learned a long time ago that panicked people needed steady energy. His handshake was firm, but not aggressive. "Miss Harper, Margaret told me to expect you. Come on back." His office was organized, but lived in. A photo of 2 teenage kids sat on his desk. He gestured for me to take a seat, then surprised me by taking the chair across from me rather than sitting behind his desk. "Margaret said this involves family fraud," he said. "Those are the hardest cases. Emotionally, not legally. Tell me everything." I opened my folder and spread the documents across his coffee table. Credit reports showing the loan and the fraudulent credit cards, the loan application with the forged signature, Janet's documentation of the camera footage, the police report case number from this afternoon, my mother's will establishing the trust fund, the bank confirmation of the trust balance, Richard's Christmas card with its damning confession. David examined each document carefully, making notes on a legal pad. When he reached Richard's card, he paused, read it twice. "Your father wrote this?" "Yes." He set it down gently, like it might burn his fingers. "Miss Harper, I've practiced law for 23 years. This is one of the most documented cases of family financial abuse I've ever seen. I didn't know whether to feel validated or devastated. Is that good or bad?" "Good for your case," he said. "Bad for what it says about your family." David sat back and organized his thoughts. "Let me explain what we're dealing with. You actually have 2 separate legal matters." He held up one finger. "Case 1, identity theft and fraud. The $21,000 loan and the $8,500 in credit cards. This is clear-cut identity theft with strong evidence. The police report opens a criminal investigation. Karen can be charged with forgery and fraud. Emily can be charged as the primary beneficiary who knowingly participated. The camera footage is a gift. Most fraud cases are circumstantial. This one has Karen on video committing the crime." He held up a second finger. "Case 2. Trust fund misappropriation. This is more complex because it's an estate matter, not criminal. Richard was the trustee of your mother's trust. He had a fiduciary duty to manage that money for your benefit. If he diverted those funds for non-beneficiary purposes, that's breach of fiduciary duty." "The Christmas card is damning," David continued. "It shows intent and awareness. The challenge is that the trust was supposed to disburse 10 years ago. Statute of limitations may apply." He paused. "But there's something called the discovery rule. The clock doesn't start until the victim discovers the fraud. You didn't know about any of this until yesterday. That matters." He looked at me directly. "The fraud case is strong. The trust case is winnable, but will require subpoenas, bank records, transaction histories. We need to prove where the $45,000 went and when. If we can show it went to Emily's businesses, we can trace it." I asked the question I was almost afraid to hear answered. "How long will this take?" David's expression was honest. "The fraud case, if they don't fight it, a few months. If they do fight it, 6 to 12 months. The trust case, longer. A year, maybe more." He studied me. "Can you handle that?" I thought about my mother's will, the words she'd written to protect me. I thought about my name on loans I never signed, credit cards I never opened, 23 years of being dismissed and stolen from. "I can handle whatever it takes." David pulled out a fee agreement. "I need to be honest about costs." The fraud case could be handled on contingency, meaning he'd take a percentage if we won damages. The trust case would require hourly billing, potentially $15,000 to $25,000 depending on complexity. "I know that's significant," he said. "But if we recover the trust fund, it pays for itself and then some." I did the math. My savings were about $18,000. Enough to start, but not unlimited. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had to spend money to recover money that was already mine. David surprised me then. "Margaret's a friend. I'll reduce my hourly rate and defer some billing until we see how the trust case develops. I don't do this often, but this case matters, not just legally but morally. What they did to you shouldn't go unanswered." Another stranger showing me more decency than my own family. I signed the retainer agreement. My hand was steady. David outlined the immediate next steps. File the FTC identity theft affidavit. His paralegal would help with that tomorrow. Send dispute letters to all 3 credit bureaus along with the police report. Send a fraud affidavit to South Trust and the credit card companies. Request a credit freeze to prevent any new accounts from being opened. Begin drafting the civil complaint for the trust fund case. Subpoena bank records from the institution that held the trust. During all of this, David said, do not discuss the case with your family. Everything in writing, nothing verbal. If they contact you, forward it to me. If they show up, don't engage. I thought about that. What if they try to apologize? Offer to pay me back? David's expression hardened. They had 10 years to do the right thing. Don't let them buy their way out now. If they offer settlement, we negotiate from a position of strength, not guilt. He walked me to the door, then paused with his hand on the frame. One more thing. Cases like this get ugly. Your family will try different tactics. Guilt, anger, threats, playing victim. Karen sounds like someone who's used to getting her way. When that stops working, people like that escalate. His eyes were serious. Document everything. Save every text, every voicemail, every email. If anyone threatens you, call me immediately. Then call the police. I thought about Karen's smug smile through the frosted glass. Her voice saying, finally, we can relax when I was gone. You think they'd threaten me? David's answer was blunt. I think people who steal $45,000 from a grieving child and then forge her name for $30,000 more aren't people who respect boundaries. Protect yourself. Trust your instincts. They've been warning you about these people for years. I drove home as the sun set over Charlotte, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. My phone had been buzzing all afternoon. I'd ignored it, focused on the tasks at hand. Now, stopped at a red light, I finally looked. Richard, 4 missed calls, 3 voicemails. Karen, 2 texts. Emily, 1 text. I read them one by one. Richard's voicemail, his voice thin and pleading. Olivia, please. This has gone too far. We can work this out as a family. Just call me back. Karen's text, sharp and deflecting. You're making a huge mistake. Think about what you're doing to your father. And Emily. Emily, who had smiled at me through the glass. Emily, whose failed businesses had eaten my inheritance. Emily, whose loan was destroying my credit. Her text read, Mom told me what you're doing. You're actually insane. This is going to destroy everything. And for what? Money? I read Emily's words twice. For what? Money? The money they stole, the identity they forged, the inheritance they took, and she had the audacity to call me greedy. One more text came through as I sat there. Richard again. Please, let's meet tomorrow, just you and me. No Karen, no Emily, father and daughter. Give me a chance to explain. You owe me that much. You owe me that much. After everything, he thought I owed him. I stared at the message, David's warning echoing in my mind. Don't meet with them alone. But maybe this was an opportunity, a chance to hear what he had to say, to record whatever confession he might offer. I typed back carefully, Public place, tomorrow, 2 p.m., cafe on Providence Road. Bring your explanations. I'll bring mine. Then I put my phone down and drove the rest of the way home in silence, preparing for a conversation 23 years in the making. December 27th, 1:15 in the afternoon. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, applying lipstick with hands that refused to shake. In less than an hour, I would sit across from my father and demand answers to questions I'd been too afraid to ask for 23 years. I dressed deliberately, professional but not severe. Dark jeans, a gray sweater, my good boots, and the pearl necklace. This time I wore it outside my collar, visible, deliberate. I wanted Richard to see it. I wanted him to remember whose daughter I was, whose daughter he had betrayed. David's instructions ran through my mind as I gathered my things. North Carolina is a one-party consent state. You can record without telling him. Don't accuse, let him talk. People reveal more when they think they're explaining. Stay calm. The moment you get emotional, he'll use it against you. I opened the voice memo app on my phone, tested it, made sure it was working. This conversation would be documented. Whatever Richard said today would become evidence. Café Meridian sat on Providence Road, all exposed brick and large windows. The afternoon crowd was light, professionals on laptops, a mother with a stroller, a couple sharing dessert in the corner. Normal people living normal lives while I prepared to face my father's betrayal. I arrived 15 minutes early, chose a table in the back corner with my back to the wall and a clear view of the entrance, ordered black coffee I wouldn't drink, set my phone on the table, recording app running, screen dark, and waited. At 1:58, the door opened and Richard walked in. He looked older than I remembered, grayer, smaller somehow. His eyes scanned the room until they found me, and I watched emotions cycle across his face. Relief, guilt, something that might have been fear. He walked toward my table like a man approaching his own sentencing. He sat across from me without ordering anything. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The cafe noise filled the silence. Espresso machine hissing, soft music playing, someone laughing at the counter. Finally, Richard cleared his throat. "Thank you for meeting me." I didn't respond, just waited. He shifted in his seat, uncomfortable with the silence I refused to fill. "Olivia, I know you're upset. I understand, but this has all gotten out of hand." He leaned forward slightly. "Karen told me you filed a police report. Is that true?" "Yes." One word, nothing more. Let him talk. Richard's face tightened. "That wasn't necessary. This is a family matter. We can handle this ourselves." I kept my voice flat. "Is it a family matter? Because the bank and the police seem to think it's fraud." He flinched at the word. "Look, I know things got complicated, but we can fix this. Karen and Emily are willing to work out a payment plan. We can make this right without involving courts and lawyers and—" I cut him off. "A payment plan for the $29,000 they stole using my name? Or a payment plan for the $45,000 Mom left me that you never gave me?" The color drained from Richard's face. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Who told you about that?" And there it was. Not a denial, not confusion. Just who told you? An admission wrapped in a question. "Does it matter?" I said. "I know, Dad. I've seen the will. I've seen the bank confirmation. I've seen the Christmas card you sent Aunt Margaret thanking her for keeping quiet." Richard slumped back in his chair like I'd punched him. He ran a hand over his face, and for a moment he looked exhausted, defeated. But I had learned not to trust his performances. "You have to understand the situation I was in," he started. "After your mother died, everything was chaos. The house, the bills, raising you and Emily. Karen came into our lives and things got better. But money was always tight." He spread his hands, pleading. "When you turned 25, Emily's event planning business was failing. She needed capital. Karen said you had a good job, you were stable, you didn't need the money as urgently as Emily did. I was going to pay it back. That was always the plan." I let him finish, then asked the obvious questions. "You were going to pay it back? With what? When?" He had no answer. "And the loan? The credit cards? Were you planning to pay those back too?" His voice rose slightly, defensive. "That was Karen and Emily. I didn't know about those until recently." "You didn't know your wife was walking into banks with my forged signature? You didn't notice credit cards arriving at your house in my name?" Richard's composure cracked. His voice rose before he could stop himself. "Karen said if we got caught, you'd forgive us. You always forgive us. You always come back." He stopped, realizing what he'd said, but it was too late. Those words hung in the air between us, ugly and true. They had counted on my forgiveness. They had budgeted for it. My kindness wasn't something they valued. It was something they exploited, a resource to be harvested, a weakness to be used. I kept my voice steady even as something cold settled in my chest. "Let me make sure I understand. Mom left me $45,000. You took it and gave it to Emily. Then Karen got my social security number by lying to me. Then she forged my signature on a $21,000 loan. Then someone, Karen or Emily or both, opened credit cards in my name and ran up $8,000 more. And on Christmas Eve, you kicked me out of dinner because Emily didn't want to see me, right before the credit alert exposed everything. I paused. Did I miss anything? Richard couldn't meet my eyes. It wasn't like that. It wasn't planned that way. Then how was it, Dad? Help me understand how stealing $75,000 from your daughter isn't like that. He had no answer. Just sat there, jaw working, staring at the table. So I asked the question I'd waited 23 years to ask. Why was Emily always more important than me? His head snapped up. That's not true. It's been true my entire life, and you know it. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Shame, maybe. Or the ghost of the father he might have been. I tried to love you both equally. Did you? Or did you just love whoever Karen told you to love? Richard changed tactics then. His voice went soft, pleading. Olivia, I'm begging you. Drop the police report. Drop the lawsuit. We can handle this privately. I'll make sure you're paid back. He leaned forward, desperate. Emily could go to jail. Do you understand that? Your sister could go to jail. If you do this, you'll destroy her. You'll destroy our family. I looked at this man who was supposed to have protected me, who had let Karen poison everything, who had stolen my mother's last gift. Emily destroyed her own life when she chose to forge my name. And what family, Dad? The family that kicked me out on Christmas Eve? The family that stole my inheritance? The family that used my identity like a credit line? I stood, gathering my phone. That's not a family. That's a group of people who take turns robbing me. Richard grabbed my wrist. Not hard, but desperate. Olivia, please, think about what you're doing. I looked at his hand on my arm, then at his face. Let go of me. He did, immediately, something flickering across his expression. Fear, maybe, or the realization that his grip on me, literal and otherwise, was finally broken. I pulled on my coat. If Emily didn't want to go to jail, she shouldn't have committed a crime. If Karen didn't want to face charges, she shouldn't have walked into a bank with my forged signature. And if you wanted to keep your family, you shouldn't have stolen from one daughter to spoil the other. I walked out of the cafe without looking back. The cold air hit my face, clean and sharp. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt emptied out. Like I'd finally said everything I'd been holding for 23 years, and now there was just space where the words used to be. I sat in my car, hands on the steering wheel. The recording app showed 47 minutes, 23 seconds. I saved it, backed it up to the cloud. Evidence. My hands were shaking now, delayed reaction setting in. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. I opened it. You think you can destroy this family and walk away? You have no idea what you've started. This isn't over. No signature, but the venom was familiar. Karen. I stared at the message for a long moment. Fear flickered, brief and cold. Then I screenshot the text, forwarded it to David with 2 words. She threatened me. His response came in 30 seconds. Good. She just gave us more evidence. Don't engage. Let her dig her own grave. I put my phone down and started the car. Karen thought she could scare me into silence. She didn't understand that the woman who used to be afraid of her didn't exist anymore. That woman died on a frozen porch on Christmas Eve, holding a gift no one wanted. This woman was done being afraid. 2 weeks passed like a fever dream. I went to work, sat at my desk, analyzed spreadsheets, and flagged discrepancies for clients who weren't my family. I ate meals I didn't taste, slept in fragments between checking my phone for updates that never came. The police case was under investigation, no news yet. David had filed the civil complaint for the trust fund, and now we waited for a response. The credit bureaus were reviewing my disputes, 30 to 60 days standard processing time. Everything moved at the speed of bureaucracy while my life hung in suspension. The messages from my family never stopped. Richard texted on day 3. Olivia, please call me. We can still fix this. Day 7. Your silence is breaking my heart. I'm still your father. Day 12. Karen is having panic attacks. Emily can't sleep. Are you happy now? By day 14, he went silent. Somehow that was worse. Karen was less subtle. Day 2. You think you're so righteous. You're destroying innocent people. Day 5. I gave you 20 years of my life. This is how you repay me? Day 8. If I go to jail, your father will never forgive you. He'll die alone, and it'll be your fault. Day 11, the one that cut deepest. Fine, ruin us, but know that your mother would be disgusted by what you've become. My mother. She dared invoke my mother. The woman whose money she helped steal. The woman whose daughter she'd spent 2 decades trying to erase. I stared at that message until my vision blurred, then screenshot it like all the others and forwarded it to David. Emily's messages were different, raw and accusatory. Day 4. You're actually insane. I can't believe we're related. Day 6. This is all a misunderstanding and you're turning it into a federal case. Day 9. Mom says you're trying to put me in prison. Over money, over money. Day 13. You've always been jealous of me. This is just your revenge for not being the favorite. I read that last one 3 times. Jealous of her, revenge for not being the favorite. She really believed that. Karen had spent so many years poisoning her that Emily genuinely thought I was the villain of this story. Not once in any of these messages did anyone apologize. Not once did anyone acknowledge what they'd done. They weren't sorry they stole from me. They were sorry they got caught. January 10th. I was at my kitchen table trying to focus on a client report when my phone buzzed with an unknown Charlotte number. I almost ignored it, assuming it was Karen from a new number. But something made me answer. Miss Harper, this is Detective James Morrison, Financial Crimes Unit. I've completed my initial investigation. I'd like to meet in person to discuss findings. Can you come to the station this afternoon, say 2 p.m.? I called David immediately after hanging up. His voice was calm but alert. This is good. If he wants to meet in person, he has something substantial. I'll meet you there. Don't go alone. The next 4 hours stretched endlessly. I tried to work, couldn't focus. Kept checking my phone for more family messages, but strangely, there were none. The silence felt ominous. Did they know the detective was calling? Had they received calls too? I showered, dressed professionally, put on the pearl necklace that had become my daily armor. Whatever was coming, I wanted to face it looking like someone who deserved to be taken seriously. Detective Morrison's office was cluttered in the way of someone who had too many cases and not enough hours. Files stacked on every surface. A coffee mug that said, "World's Okayest Detective." He was in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and reading glasses that he kept pushing up his nose. David sat beside me, legal pad ready, as Morrison spread a file across his desk. Miss Harper, here's what we've confirmed. He pulled out the first document. Signature analysis. Our forensic examiner compared the signature on the loan application to samples of your authentic signature. His conclusion, with high confidence, is that the signature is not yours. It's a forgery. He set that aside and pulled out another sheet. Bank footage. We've positively identified the woman who submitted the application as Karen Elaine Harper, your stepmother. She told the bank employee she was helping her stepdaughter with paperwork. The employee had no reason to question it. He pulled out a third document. Digital evidence. The fraudulent email account olivia.harper.financial@gmail was created on August 12th of last year. We traced the IP address to a residential location, 4712 Maple Ridge Drive, your father's house. He looked at me over his glasses. The device that created that account and submitted the credit card applications was a laptop registered to Emily Rose Harper. David leaned forward. You're saying Emily's laptop was used for all of this? Morrison nodded. We have IP address logs from the email provider and the credit card companies. Same device, same location every time. And there's more. He pulled out phone records. One of the credit card applications required phone verification. A call was made to the number listed on the application. It was answered. The person who answered confirmed the applicant's identity. He paused. That phone number belongs to Emily Harper's cell phone. She answered verification calls, pretending to be you. The room felt airless. I'd suspected. I'd known, on some level. But hearing it laid out so clinically, with evidence and timestamps and forensic analysis, was different. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't family drama. This was documented, systematic fraud. Morrison closed the file. Miss Harper, in 15 years of doing this work, I've seen a lot of family fraud cases, but the level of coordination here is uncommon. This wasn't impulsive. This was planned and executed over a period of 2 years by multiple people working together. David asked the question I was afraid to voice. What charges are we looking at? Morrison pulled out another document. Karen Harper, forgery, which is a Class H felony. Identity theft, Class G felony. Obtaining property by false pretenses. He moved to the next page. Emily Harper, identity theft, fraud, obtaining property by false pretenses. If convicted, they're looking at potential prison time, probation at minimum, felony records for both of them. He looked at me directly then, his expression neutral but not unkind. Miss Harper, the district attorney is willing to proceed with charges. But in cases like this, family cases, we give the victim a chance to weigh in. He paused. Do you want us to move forward with criminal prosecution? The weight of the question pressed down on me. Criminal prosecution, felony charges, prison time. Karen, who had made me feel like a stranger in my own family for 23 years. Emily, who I had once tried to love like a real sister. I asked for a moment. Stepped into the hallway, leaned against the wall and tried to breathe. The arguments against prosecution came first. Emily is your sister, your blood. Richard will never speak to you again. The family will be destroyed publicly. People will judge you. She sent her own family to jail. Maybe there's still a chance for reconciliation. Then the arguments for, they stole $75,000. They forged your name. They ruined your credit. They kicked you out on Christmas Eve. They've spent 2 weeks threatening and manipulating you, not apologizing. If you drop this, they learn that crime works. They'll do it again, to you or someone else. I closed my eyes and saw my mother's face, pale and thin in those last months. Her voice, soft but certain, pressing the pearl necklace into my 12-year-old hands. Your name is the only thing you truly own, sweetheart. Never let anyone take it from you. She didn't raise me to be a doormat. She left me money so I'd have a foundation. And Karen and Emily took it all, the money and the name. I walked back into Morrison's office. David looked up, questioning. The detective waited, pen ready. I sat down, back straight, hand steady. Yes, I want to press charges, against both of them. Morrison nodded. No surprise, no judgment. I'll send the file to the DA's office today. They'll review and likely issue arrest warrants within the week. You may be contacted for additional statements. Your attorney should be present. He paused. And, Miss Harper, you might want to let someone know where you are for the next few days. People react unpredictably when they find out charges are coming. David walked me out of the station. The late afternoon sun was weak and pale. I felt exposed, like the whole world could see what I'd just done. Go home, David said. Rest. This was the hardest part. The legal system takes over now. Let it work. He paused, his hand on my shoulder briefly. And Olivia, I'm proud of you. Not many people have the courage to do what you just did. I sat in my car in the parking lot, trying to process. My phone buzzed. A text from Emily, the first in 2 days. The police just called Dad. They're coming for Mom. I hope you're proud of yourself. You just killed this family. A second message followed immediately. And I will never forgive you. I read it twice, then typed back, You did this, not me. I hit send, then blocked her number. Starting the car, I pulled out of the lot. In my rearview mirror, the police station grew smaller. Ahead of me, whatever came next. I didn't know if I was ready. But I knew I was done being the one who paid for other people's choices. January 17th. I was at work, staring at a client report I'd read 3 times without absorbing a single word, when my phone buzzed with a text from Detective Morrison. Warrants executed this morning. Both subjects in custody. Arraignment scheduled for tomorrow. Both subjects. Karen and Emily. I read the message 3 times, letting the words sink in. My stepmother and half-sister were being booked into the Mecklenburg County Jail at this very moment. Fingerprints, mugshots, the whole process I'd seen on television but never imagined would touch my own family. I closed my office door and sat at my desk, breathing slowly. This was real. This was happening. I didn't feel victory. I felt the strange grief of finally admitting that my family had never been what I pretended it was. The fantasy I'd carried for 23 years, the hope that someday they would love me, was officially dead. I texted David. I saw what happens next. His response came quickly. They'll be released on bail within hours. Then they'll hire lawyers and start fighting. Stay vigilant. By noon, my phone was flooded with notifications. Not from Karen or Emily directly. They'd been legally advised not to contact me. But everyone else in their orbit suddenly had plenty to say. Karen's sister Deborah posted on Facebook first. Our family is being torn apart by a vindictive, money-hungry woman who would rather see her own stepmother in jail than forgive a simple misunderstanding. Pray for us. She tagged half the extended family, mutual friends, even people I'd gone to high school with. The comments poured in. So sad. Some people have no loyalty. Family should stick together no matter what. Karen's cousins joined in within hours. Olivia Harper is suing her own sister over a loan. Disgusting. Another one. I always knew there was something cold about her. She never fit in. And another. Can you imagine doing this to your own family? What kind of person sends their stepmother to jail? I scrolled through the posts, my stomach churning. They weren't telling the truth, not even close. No mention of identity theft, no mention of forgery, no mention of the trust fund stolen when I was 25. The narrative they were spinning was simple. Olivia Harper was persecuting her poor, innocent family over a loan disagreement. I was the villain. They were the victims. My first instinct was to defend myself, to post the truth, the forged signature, the camera footage, the $75,000. But David's voice echoed in my mind. Don't engage on social media. The court of public opinion doesn't matter. The actual court does. I closed Facebook, deactivated my account, but the damage was already spreading. That evening, I opened my laptop to find an email from Richard. He'd created a new address since I'd blocked his old one. Subject line, "Please read this from your father." The message was long, pleading, full of explanations that explained nothing. Olivia, I know we can't talk right now because of the legal situation, but I had to write this. You have to understand why Emily needed that money. After her boutique failed, she was in debt. Karen was trying to protect her. That's what mothers do. Yes, they made mistakes. Yes, they should have asked you, but they didn't do it to hurt you. They did it because they were desperate. You have a good job, a stable life. You didn't need that money the way Emily did. Please, Olivia, drop the charges. Let Karen and Emily pay you back over time. We can still save this family. I'm begging you as your father. I read it twice. No acknowledgement of the trust fund he'd stolen 10 years earlier. No acknowledgement that forgery is a crime, not a mistake. Still framing everything as Olivia having more than she needed, as if that justified theft. Still prioritizing Emily's comfort over my rights. I forwarded the email to David, then typed one line back to Richard. You're not my father. A father protects his children. You sold one to save the other. I hit send, blocked the new email address. Done. The isolation deepened over the following days. I realized how small my world had become. Karen's entire extended family had turned against me. Aunt Deborah, Karen's cousins, Karen's elderly mother who called me a snake in a Facebook comment. Emily's friends only knew Emily's version of events. Several of Richard's siblings said they didn't want to take sides, which meant they'd taken Karen's. Old college friends watched from a distance, liking the posts about me but never reaching out. Co-workers who'd seen the Facebook drama avoided the topic entirely, their silence louder than words. The physical toll was undeniable. I ate less, slept worse, jumped at every phone notification, caught myself looking over my shoulder in parking lots. Karen's threat echoed in my mind. You have no idea what you've started. Some nights I lay awake wondering if I'd made a mistake, if the price of justice was too high, if I should just call the whole thing off, accept my losses, go back to being invisible. Then I'd remember the forged signature, the camera footage, the $75,000, the Christmas card where Richard thanked Margaret for keeping quiet, and I'd know I hadn't made a mistake. I'd just finally stopped making their mistakes comfortable. January 21st. I was sitting in my dark apartment, television on but muted, when my phone rang. Aunt Margaret. Her voice was warm and worried. "Sweetheart, I've been seeing what they're saying online. Are you okay?" My voice cracked for the first time in days. "I don't know anymore. I feel like I'm the villain in my own story." Margaret's response was immediate. "You're not. You're the only one who told the truth. And that makes you dangerous to them." She told me I had family. Real family. My mother's side. They'd been watching from a distance for too long, and that was about to change. "My brother Frank is flying in from Seattle next week," she said. Uncle Frank. I barely remembered him. Catherine's older brother, someone Karen had systematically cut me off from over the years. "He called me after he saw what Karen's people were posting," Margaret continued. "He's furious. And Olivia, he has something. Bank records from when your mother died. He kept copies because he never trusted Richard. He's bringing everything." Uncle Frank arrived on January 25th. We met at Aunt Margaret's house, neutral ground, safe space. He was 68 years old with my mother's eyes, the same eyes I saw in my own mirror. Tall and weathered, the kind of man who spoke slowly because he meant every word. He hugged me like I was the most precious thing he'd seen in years. "I should have done this 20 years ago," he said, his voice rough. "After Catherine died, I tried to stay involved. But Karen made it clear I wasn't welcome. Richard went along with it. Said it was confusing for the girls to have too many people around." He shook his head. "He was isolating you. I see that now." He opened a worn leather briefcase and pulled out documents, bank statements from the trust account, dated from my mother's death to 3 years later. Withdrawal records showing the $45,000 depleted over 18 months. One withdrawal memo caught my eye. "Transfer to R. Harper personal account." "This shows Richard moved the money into his own account," Frank said. "Then it disappeared. I couldn't prove where it went until now." He looked at me. "Your lawyer can subpoena Richard's accounts from that period. Bet you anything it went straight to Emily's first business." We sat in Margaret's kitchen afterward. Coffee, cookies she'd baked that morning, the warmth of people who actually cared. Frank and Margaret had been talking to other relatives from my mother's side. Cousins I hadn't seen since childhood were reaching out. "We're with you," Frank said. "Whatever you need, lawyers, money, a place to stay if things get bad. We've got you." I cried then, for the first time since this started. Not from pain, but from relief. Margaret held me while Frank put a hand on my shoulder. This was what family was supposed to feel like. I'd almost forgotten. Karen had spent 23 years cutting me off from these people. Now they were fighting back. "Give those documents to your lawyer," Frank said when I'd composed myself. "Let's finish this." I nodded, wiping my eyes. "Thank you, both of you, for everything." Margaret smiled. "For what, sweetheart?" I looked at them, these people who shared my mother's blood, who had come back for me after so many years, for reminding me who I actually belonged to. 3 days later, I received official notification from the court. David called with the details. The preliminary hearing is set for March 15th. Karen and Emily will both be there. Their lawyers are already filing motions to dismiss. He paused. And Olivia, they're using what's called the family permission defense. They're claiming you verbally authorized everything, that you agreed to all of it and changed your mind later out of spite. A lie. A complete fabrication. But I'd have to prove it was a lie in court. I'll be there, I said. 6 weeks. 6 weeks until I looked Karen and Emily in the eye and told the truth under oath. 6 weeks until a judge decided whether justice existed for women like me. That night, I held my mother's pearl necklace in my palm, watching the light play across its surface. I would wear it to court. Let them see whose daughter I really was. Let them remember whose legacy they'd tried to steal. March 14th. The day before the preliminary hearing. I sat in David Chen's conference room surrounded by evidence of my family's betrayal. 6 weeks had passed since the court date was set. 6 weeks of legal maneuvering, motions and counter-motions, strategies and counter-strategies. Karen and Emily's lawyers had tried twice to get the case dismissed. Both attempts failed. Their main defense was still the same lie they'd been pushing from the beginning: family permission. They claimed I had verbally authorized the loan and the credit cards, then changed my mind out of spite when I wasn't invited to Christmas dinner. It was absurd. It was insulting. And I would have to sit in a courtroom tomorrow and listen to them say it to a judge's face. David spread documents across the conference table, organizing our evidence one final time. "Let's walk through everything," he said. "You need to know this material cold." For the fraud case, we had the bank security footage showing Karen submitting the forged loan application. We had the forensic handwriting analysis proving the signature wasn't mine. We had IP address records tracing the fraudulent email and credit card applications to Emily's laptop. We had phone records showing Emily answered verification calls pretending to be me. We had credit reports documenting the damage. We had Detective Morrison's complete investigation report. For the trust fund case, which overlapped with the criminal matter, we had my mother's will establishing the trust. We had the bank confirmation of the $45,000 balance. We had Uncle Frank's records showing Richard withdrew the funds into his personal account. We had Richard's Christmas card admitting his intent to hide the money from me. We had a timeline correlating the trust fund depletion with Emily's failed businesses. David tapped his pen against the stack of papers. We present the fraud evidence first. It's airtight. The trust fund evidence supports a pattern of financial abuse going back over a decade. By the time we're done, the judge will see this isn't a family misunderstanding. It's a systematic scheme. Looking at it all laid out, the scope was staggering. My family hadn't just stolen from me once. They'd built a system for stealing from me, and they would have continued indefinitely if I hadn't caught them. David shifted to witness preparation. I would testify. So would Detective Morrison and Janet from the bank. David played devil's advocate, firing questions at me the way Karen and Emily's lawyers would tomorrow. "Isn't it true you had a contentious relationship with your stepmother?" I kept my voice even. "Karen made our relationship difficult. I tried for 23 years to be part of that family." "Isn't it possible you verbally agreed to help your sister and simply forgot?" "No. Emily never asked me to co-sign anything. I would remember a $21,000 commitment. Why would your own family steal from you? What's their motive?" "Money. Emily's businesses failed repeatedly. The trust fund my mother left me was used to fund those failures without my knowledge or consent." "You're a financial analyst. Wouldn't you have noticed sooner if this were really fraud?" "The fraud was designed to avoid detection. They used a fake email address, forged my signature, and had credit cards sent to my father's house. Not mine." "Isn't this really about the inheritance you feel entitled to?" "It's about the inheritance my mother legally left me that was stolen. It's about identity theft and forgery. The evidence speaks for itself." David nodded after each answer, making notes. "Good. Stay factual. Don't get emotional. Don't speculate on their motives beyond what the evidence shows." He leaned forward. "They want you angry. Angry looks unstable. They want you crying. Crying looks manipulative to some judges. Be calm, be clear, be consistent. You're not on trial. They are. Remember that. He walked me through what Karen and Emily's lawyers would likely argue. Their narrative would paint me as a bitter woman who resented her stepfamily from the beginning. They would claim I verbally agreed to help Emily, then weaponized the legal system for revenge when I was excluded from Christmas dinner. They would frame Karen as a devoted mother who only wanted to help her daughter. They would describe Emily as a young woman whose vindictive stepsister was trying to destroy her life over money. They might call character witnesses. Karen's sister Deborah, probably, testifying about Karen's good character. Richard might be called to support the family permission claim. Emily's friends might describe me as cold and distant. Character witnesses don't explain away camera footage, David said. Richard's testimony is compromised because he's implicated in the trust fund theft, and the forensic evidence is objective. It doesn't care who's more sympathetic. That night I drove home through Charlotte streets I'd known my whole life. The city looked different somehow, sharper and more real. Tomorrow everything would change. I tried to eat dinner but managed only half a sandwich. Tried to watch television but couldn't focus on the screen. Tried to sleep but lay awake staring at the shadows on my ceiling. I got up and laid out my clothes for tomorrow. A navy blue dress, professional but not severe. Black heels, low and practical. And the pearl necklace. I would wear it outside my collar this time. Visible, deliberate, a message to everyone in that courtroom about whose daughter I was and whose legacy I was protecting. Around 11, doubt crept in. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, fighting the urge to call Richard. To call the whole thing off. To restore peace, accept my losses, go back to being invisible. The old Olivia, the peacekeeper, the forgiver, whispered in my ear, "Is this worth it? Is destroying your family worth $75,000? Is justice worth being alone?" I looked at my reflection in the dark window. Thought about my mother in those final months, pale and thin, pressing the pearl necklace into my hands. Your name is the only thing you truly own. They took my money. They took my credit. They took my seat at their table. They would not take my name. My phone buzzed. A text from Aunt Margaret. "Can't sleep either. Call if you need to talk," I called. Her voice was warm and steady in my ear. "How are you holding up?" "Terrified," I admitted. "What if they win?" "They won't win. The truth is on your side." "The truth doesn't always win, Aunt Margaret." A pause. Then, "No. But this time it will, because you're fighting for it." Uncle Frank got on the line. His voice was gruff but gentle. "Olivia, your mother was the bravest woman I ever knew. When she got her diagnosis, she didn't cry. She planned. She made sure you'd be protected. Karen and Richard stole that protection. Tomorrow you take it back." He paused. "Your mom is watching, and she's proud." My eyes burned, but I didn't cry. I let their voices anchor me in the dark. "Thank you, both of you." "We'll be there tomorrow," Margaret said. "Front row, you won't be alone." Morning came gray and cold. I woke before my alarm, showered, made coffee I barely tasted. I dressed slowly, each piece of clothing feeling like armor. The navy dress, the practical heels, the pearl necklace last, cool against my skin. I looked in the mirror, 35 years old. Survivor of a family that had tried to use me up. About to walk into a courtroom and demand accountability from people who never thought I'd fight back. The softness that used to live in my eyes was gone. Something harder had taken its place. Not cruel, just clear. My phone buzzed with texts. "David, heading to the courthouse, see you at 8:30, you've got this." Margaret, "On our way, love you, sweetheart." And then one more, from a blocked number that had somehow gotten through. "Emily, I hope you're happy destroying your own sister's life. See you in court, Olivia." I screenshot the message and forwarded it to David, then deleted it without responding. Emily's words couldn't hurt me anymore. Only the truth mattered now. 8:45. The Mecklenburg County Courthouse loomed ahead of me, all stone columns and institutional gravity. I walked up the steps, each one feeling like a commitment. Inside, the lobby echoed with footsteps and murmured conversations. David waited near the entrance, briefcase in hand, calm and ready. Aunt Margaret and Uncle Frank stood by the windows, rising when they saw me. And across the marble floor, near the elevators, I saw them. Karen, Emily, Richard. Flanked by 2 lawyers in expensive suits. Karen was already dabbing her eyes with a tissue, the performance beginning before the courtroom doors even opened. Emily stared at me with undisguised hatred. Richard wouldn't meet my eyes. For a moment our gazes locked. Emily and me, half-sisters, former family, now adversaries in a court of law. Emily mouthed 2 words at me, slow and deliberate. "You'll lose." I didn't flinch, didn't look away, mouthed back, "Watch me." Then I turned, walked toward David, and entered the courtroom. The heavy doors swung shut behind me with a sound like finality. No turning back now. The truth was about to have its day. Courtroom 4B smelled like old paper and floor polish. High ceilings arched overhead, wood paneling lined the walls, and an American flag stood beside the judge's empty bench. The room had the weight of a place where lives changed, where truth was supposed to matter more than performance. I sat at the prosecution table with David Chen and the Assistant District Attorney Maria Santos. My folder of evidence was organized in front of me, though I'd memorized every page. Across the aisle, Karen and Emily sat with their lawyers, 2 men in expensive suits who looked like they'd never lost a case they were paid enough to win. The gallery behind us was divided like a wedding. Front row on our side, Aunt Margaret and Uncle Frank, their faces set with determination. Front row on their side, Karen's sister Deborah, 2 of Emily's friends, tissues already clutched in manicured hands, and Richard, sitting alone in the 3rd row, looking like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. I felt Karen's eyes on me but refused to look. Instead, I focused on the empty judge's bench and touched the pearl necklace at my throat, my mother's strength close to my heart. The bailiff's voice cut through the murmured conversations. "All rise. The Honorable Judge Patricia Wells presiding." Everyone stood. A door opened behind the bench, and the judge entered. She was gray-haired with sharp eyes and an expression that suggested she had no patience for nonsense. She took her seat, and the room exhaled as we sat back down. Judge Wells reviewed the case file briefly, then looked up. "This is the preliminary hearing in the matter of the state versus Karen Elaine Harper and Emily Rose Harper. Charges include forgery, identity theft, and obtaining property by false pretenses." Her gaze swept the room. "Prosecution, your opening statement." Maria Santos stood, young and sharp and precise. "Your Honor, the evidence will show a coordinated scheme spanning over 2 years. The defendants exploited the victim's trust and her identity to obtain nearly $30,000 in fraudulent loans and credit. We have bank security footage, forensic handwriting analysis, digital evidence tracing the fraud to the defendant's devices, and documentary proof of forgery. This was not a family misunderstanding. This was theft, planned and executed with deliberate intent." The defense attorney, Victor Hale, rose next. Silver hair, smooth voice, the polished confidence of a man who got paid by the hour. "Your Honor, this case is a tragic example of family conflict blown out of proportion. My clients maintain that Miss Harper verbally authorized the financial arrangements in question. What we have here is a miscommunication between family members, now weaponized by a bitter stepsister seeking revenge for perceived slights. The prosecution's evidence is circumstantial and open to interpretation." I watched Judge Wells as Hale spoke. When he said miscommunication, her eyebrow rose almost imperceptibly. A small thing. But I noticed it, and I hoped it meant something. The prosecution called Detective Morrison to the stand first. He was sworn in and took his seat with the calm of a man who had testified hundreds of times. Maria Santos walked him through the investigation methodically, each piece of evidence building on the last. The bank security footage played on a monitor mounted on the wall. Karen entering the Pineville branch, approaching the counter, sliding documents across with a smile. This video shows Mrs. Karen Harper submitting a loan application listing Miss Olivia Harper as co-signer, Morrison explained. She told the bank employee she was helping her stepdaughter with paperwork. The forensic evidence came next. The forensic examiner concluded with high confidence that the signature on the loan application is not consistent with Miss Olivia Harper's authentic signature. In other words, it's a forgery. Then the digital trail. IP address records displayed on screen, showing the fraudulent email account and credit card applications traced to a laptop registered to Emily Harper. Phone records proving Emily had answered verification calls, impersonating me. The evidence shows a coordinated effort over approximately 2 years, Morrison concluded, multiple people working together with deliberate intent. Victor Hale approached for cross-examination, trying to poke holes. Isn't it possible someone else used Miss Emily's laptop without her knowledge? Morrison's expression didn't change. Possible, but the timing, location, and pattern all point to the same user across multiple incidents over 2 years. Hale tried again. Could the signature analysis be wrong? The examiner has testified in over 200 cases. His methodology is peer-reviewed and court-accepted. Hale retreated, having gained nothing. I allowed myself a small breath of relief. The defense called Karen to the stand next. She walked slowly, dabbing her eyes, the picture of wounded innocence. Her testimony was soft-spoken and tearful. I was only trying to help my daughter. Emily was struggling financially. I went to the bank to help with paperwork. I thought Olivia had agreed. She looked at me with watery eyes. I would never do anything to hurt Olivia. She's family. I don't understand why she's doing this to us. Maria Santos approached for cross-examination, calm but relentless. Mrs. Harper, you testified that you believed Miss Olivia Harper had agreed to co-sign the loan. Did she sign the application in your presence? Karen hesitated. No, but did you witness her signature at any time? Emily said she had spoken to her. So you submitted a loan application with someone else's signature without ever seeing them sign it? Karen's composure cracked slightly. It was a family arrangement. And yet Miss Harper's signature on that application is forensically proven to be a forgery. Can you explain that? Silence. Karen looked at her lawyer, desperate for help that couldn't come. I don't know how that happened. I watched the words land in the quiet courtroom. She didn't deny it. She just claimed not to know. It was almost an admission. Emily took the stand next, called by her own defense. Unlike Karen's tearful performance, Emily was rigid with defiance. I needed money for my business. My mom said she would help arrange a loan. I thought Olivia had agreed. That's what Mom told me. I didn't know anything about forged signatures. She glared at me across the room. I'm a victim here too. My own sister is trying to send me to prison. Maria Santos held up a document. Miss Harper, I'm showing you Exhibit 14. An email sent from the account olivia.harper.financial@gmail to South Trust Financial, confirming the loan application. This email was sent from your laptop. Can you explain that? Emily's jaw tightened. Someone must have used my computer. Who? Your mother, whom you live with? I don't know. Maybe. And the credit card verification call answered from your personal cell phone? Was that also someone else? Emily's eyes darted to her lawyer. I don't remember that. You don't remember answering a call and pretending to be your sister? Victor Hale stood. Objection! Counsel is badgering the witness. Judge Wells didn't blink. Overruled. The witness will answer. Emily's face reddened. I thought I was helping. Olivia would have said yes if we'd asked. The courtroom stilled. She'd just admitted to answering the verification call. I thought I was helping is not a defense to identity theft. I could feel the shift in the room, the weight of her own words settling over everything. When I took the stand, I kept David's coaching in my mind. Stay calm, stay factual, be consistent. Maria Santos guided me through the timeline. Did you ever authorize anyone to sign your name on a loan application? No, never. Did you ever agree to co-sign any loan for your sister Emily? No, she never asked me. Did you know about the credit cards opened in your name? Not until Christmas Day when I received a credit alert. How did discovering this fraud affect you? I paused, breathing steadily. My credit score dropped over 100 points. My plans to buy a home were destroyed. My professional reputation as a financial analyst was put at risk. I looked at the judge. But beyond that, I discovered that people I thought were family had been stealing from me for years. They took my mother's inheritance. They took my identity. And when I showed up at Christmas hoping to be included, they kicked me out. They didn't see me as family. They saw me as a source of funds. Victor Hale's cross-examination was brief. Isn't this lawsuit really about resentment over your father's remarriage? No, it's about forgery, identity theft, and $75,000. He had nowhere else to go. He sat down. After a brief recess, Judge Wells addressed the room directly. I've heard the evidence. I've heard the testimony. Before we proceed to closing arguments, I want to address something. Her gaze settled on the defense table. Counsel has repeatedly characterized this as a family matter and a miscommunication. I want to be clear, forgery is not a family matter. Identity theft is not a miscommunication. The evidence presented shows a pattern of deliberate fraud documented through forensic analysis, digital records, and bank footage. The defense's suggestion that Miss Olivia Harper verbally authorized actions she clearly did not authorize is not supported by any credible evidence. Karen's face went pale. Emily stared at the table. Victor Hale looked like a man calculating how to bill for a lost cause. I didn't smile, didn't react outwardly. But inside something loosened. The judge saw the truth. The judge was saying it out loud. Closing arguments will be heard now, Judge Wells continued. Given the strength of the evidence, I see no reason to delay my ruling. The arguments were brief. Prosecution, systematic fraud, clear evidence, accountability required. Defense, family conflict, harsh punishment, plea for leniency. Then Judge Wells reviewed her notes while the courtroom held its breath. Karen clutched her tissue like a lifeline. Emily stared straight ahead. Richard in the gallery looked broken. I touched my pearl necklace. Whatever happened next, I had told the truth. I had fought for my name. My mother would be proud. Judge Wells looked up. I'm prepared to render my decision. She paused, her eyes on Karen and Emily. Will the defendants please rise? The courtroom fell silent as Karen and Emily rose to their feet. Their lawyers stood beside them, papers clutched in hands that had run out of motions to file. I sat frozen at the prosecution table, my heart pounding so loud I was certain everyone could hear it. The clock on the wall ticked in the silence, each second stretching into eternity. This was it. 23 years of being dismissed, overlooked, stolen from. It all came down to what Judge Wells would say next. I touched the pearl necklace at my throat and thought of my mother. Whatever happened now, I had told the truth. I had fought. I hadn't folded the way they expected me to. Behind me, I felt Aunt Margaret lean forward and briefly touch my shoulder. Uncle Frank sat rigid beside her. Across the aisle, Karen's shredded tissue trembled in her hands. Emily stood with forced defiance, but her hands were shaking. Richard slumped in the third row, staring at the floor, unable to watch. Judge Wells looked at Karen first. Mrs. Karen Elaine Harper. Karen's breath caught audibly in the quiet room. The judge's voice was measured and clear. You have been charged with forgery in the first degree, identity theft, and obtaining property by false pretenses. The evidence presented in this case is overwhelming. Bank footage places you at the scene of the crime, personally submitting a fraudulent loan application. Forensic analysis confirms the signature was forged. Your own testimony failed to provide any credible explanation for how your stepdaughter's forged signature ended up on documents you submitted. She paused. You exploited your stepdaughter's trust and her identity for financial gain. You did so deliberately over an extended period with no apparent remorse. The judge straightened the papers before her. On the charge of forgery, guilty. On the charge of identity theft, guilty. On the charge of obtaining property by false pretenses, guilty. Karen swayed slightly. Her lawyer steadied her arm. The tissue in her hand fell to the floor unnoticed. You are hereby sentenced to 18 months of supervised probation, Judge Wells continued. You are prohibited from accessing, managing, or having any authority over any financial accounts belonging to any person other than yourself. You are ordered to complete a certified financial crimes awareness program. Any violation of these terms will result in immediate incarceration. Additionally, you are jointly and severally liable for full restitution to the victim. Karen opened her mouth as if to speak, but her lawyer grabbed her arm, warning her to stay silent. Tears streamed down her face, real ones this time, not the performance she'd been giving all morning. She looked toward Richard in the gallery, desperate for something, support or comfort or absolution. He didn't look back. He sat with his head bowed, unable or unwilling to meet her eyes. Judge Wells turned to Emily. Miss Emily Rose Harper. Emily lifted her chin, still trying to project defiance, but her eyes betrayed her fear. You have been charged with identity theft, fraud, and obtaining property by false pretenses. The digital evidence against you is irrefutable. The fraudulent email account was created on your laptop. Credit card applications were submitted from your device. You personally answered verification calls, impersonating your sister. The judge's voice hardened slightly. Your testimony that you thought you were helping is not a defense. It is a confession. You knowingly participated in a scheme to defraud your own sister. On the charge of identity theft, guilty. On the charge of fraud, guilty. On the charge of obtaining property by false pretenses, guilty. Emily's defiance crumbled. Her face went white, and for a moment I thought she might collapse. Her lawyer put a hand on her elbow to steady her. You are hereby sentenced to 18 months of supervised probation. You will complete 200 hours of community service. You are ordered to pay full restitution in the amount of $29,500, representing the total of the fraudulent loan and credit card balances. Failure to comply with restitution payments will result in wage garnishment and potential incarceration. Judge Wells paused, letting the weight of her next words settle. You will carry a felony conviction on your record. Emily turned and looked at me then, not with hatred this time, with something rawer. The shock of someone who never truly believed consequences would come. Her mouth moved, but no sound emerged. Then she looked down, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Judge Wells removed her reading glasses and addressed the entire room. Before I conclude, I want to address something that has been raised repeatedly in this courtroom. Defense counsel characterized these crimes as a family matter, a miscommunication, a misunderstanding. She paused, her gaze sweeping across both tables. Let me be absolutely clear. This court does not recognize family as a license to commit crimes. A family relationship does not grant permission to forge signatures. It does not authorize identity theft. It does not excuse fraud. Her voice carried the weight of decades on the bench. If anything, crimes committed by family members are more egregious, because they exploit the very trust that family is supposed to represent. You took advantage of someone who should have been able to trust you. You stole not just money, but her credit, her identity, and her sense of safety within her own family. The fact that you are related to the victim makes this worse, not better. She looked directly at me. Miss Olivia Harper showed tremendous courage in bringing this matter forward. Many victims of family fraud stay silent out of shame or misplaced loyalty. She chose truth over silence. This court honors that choice. Her expression softened almost imperceptibly. Your name has been cleared. Your record has been protected. Justice has been served. The bailiff called the room to rise as Judge Wells exited. The moment she was gone, the tension broke like a wave. Karen collapsed into her chair, sobbing. Emily stood frozen, staring at nothing. Victor Hale was already talking in low tones about appeals, his voice urgent and calculating. Karen's sister Deborah rushed forward from the gallery, shooting a venomous look in my direction that I barely registered. Aunt Margaret wrapped me in a fierce hug before I could fully process what had happened. "You did it, sweetheart. You did it." Uncle Frank's eyes were wet when he put his hand on my shoulder. "Your mother would be so proud." David Chen shook my hand, professional but warm. "This was justice," he said. "Real justice. It doesn't happen as often as it should." I felt strangely hollow, not triumphant, not vengeful, just finished, like setting down a weight I'd carried so long I'd forgotten what my shoulders felt like without it. I looked for Richard in the gallery. He was already gone, slipped out during the judge's final statement. He couldn't face me, couldn't face any of it. Outside the courtroom, David pulled me aside in the hallway. His expression was serious, but his eyes were bright, with something like excitement. "Olivia, I need to tell you something. The criminal case is resolved, but there's more." I looked at him, confused. He continued, "With the evidence we presented today and these guilty verdicts, we have everything we need to move forward with the civil case for your mother's trust fund." My breath caught. "Richard's Christmas card is an admission of intent," David explained. "Uncle Frank's bank records prove the money was withdrawn. Today's convictions establish a pattern of financial abuse spanning over a decade. We can file suit against Richard for breach of fiduciary duty. The $45,000 your mother left you, we can get it back, plus interest, plus damages, plus legal fees." He smiled. "With interest over 10 years, we're looking at recovering potentially $60,000 to $70,000. And given the strength of our evidence, I think Richard will settle rather than go through another trial. He can't afford more public exposure." I hadn't let myself hope for this. The fraud case had felt like enough. Clearing my name. Getting restitution from Emily. But my mother's money, the inheritance Catherine had meant for me to have, it might actually come back. "File it," I said. "File everything." I walked out of the courthouse with Margaret and Frank into the cool March afternoon. The sun was bright, the air fresh, and I felt lighter than I had in months. Then I saw him, Richard, standing by his car in the parking lot, not with Karen and Emily, who were somewhere inside being processed and signing paperwork, alone, waiting. When he saw me, he took a step forward. Margaret and Frank moved to flank me protectively. "Olivia." His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. I stopped, waiting. "I hope you're satisfied," he said. "You've destroyed everything." I looked at this man who was supposed to have been my father, this broken man who had chosen the wrong family over and over, who had let Karen poison everything, who had stolen my mother's last gift to me. "No, Dad," I said. "You destroyed everything, 23 years ago when you chose them over me. I just finally stopped letting you get away with it." Something crumbled in his expression, not anger, something deeper. Recognition, maybe, or grief for the relationship we might have had if he'd made different choices. He opened his mouth, closed it, then turned and walked to his car without another word. I watched him go and felt the death of a hope I hadn't known I was still holding. The hope that someday he would choose me. That door was closed now. Forever. Margaret took my arm gently. "Come on, sweetheart. Let's get you home." Frank walked on my other side as we headed toward Margaret's car. I took one last look at the courthouse, the place where my name had been cleared, where the truth had finally had its day, where justice, imperfect and painful and real, had been served. It wasn't happiness I felt, not exactly. It was something quieter, deeper, peace. The peace of no longer pretending. The peace of standing in truth, even when it cost everything. Margaret asked what I wanted to do now. I thought about it for a moment. "I want to go somewhere quiet, and I want to not think about any of them for one whole day." She smiled. "I know just the place." As we drove away, I touched my pearl necklace and thought about the trust fund case still to come. The restitution payments Emily would struggle to make. The probation Karen would have to endure. The life I would have to rebuild from the rubble of a family that never truly was. But for now, there was only one thought. The hardest part was over. What came next was just living, and for the first time in 35 years, I got to decide what that looked like. 3 months later, I stood in my empty apartment surrounded by cardboard boxes. June sunlight poured through the windows, warm and golden, illuminating walls stripped bare of everything that had made this place home. But I wasn't sad. I was moving. Tomorrow I would close on a townhouse of my own, a place I had dreamed of buying before my credit was destroyed. Now that dream was real again. Credit restored, record cleared, down payment secured, a home earned and protected, built on a foundation of truth. I made coffee and stood by the window one last time, looking out at the parking lot where I had sat in my car on Christmas morning, staring at a credit alert that changed everything. That woman felt like a stranger now. She had been standing on her father's porch, gift in hand, still hoping to be let in. This woman built her own doors and decided who got to walk through them. The letter from David Chen's office sat open on my kitchen table. The trust fund case was settled. Richard hadn't fought it. He couldn't afford to, financially or emotionally. He signed the settlement agreement 2 weeks ago, and just like that, 23 years of theft came to an end. Total recovery, $62,000. The original $45,000 my mother left me, plus interest, minus legal fees. A check that represented my mother's love, finally delivered. That money would go toward the townhouse. My mother's gift, 2 decades late, would become the foundation of my new home. Catherine had wanted to give her daughter security. Now I finally had it. Richard had enclosed a letter with the settlement paperwork. I almost threw it away without reading it. But curiosity won, the same curiosity that had led me to check that credit alert on Christmas morning. His handwriting was shakier than I remembered. "Olivia, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I failed you in ways I'm only now beginning to understand. Your mother would be ashamed of me. I'm ashamed of me. I hope someday you find peace. I don't think I ever will." No request to reconcile, no excuses, just acknowledgement. I read it once, then set it aside. I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel love either, just a distant sadness for a man who lost everything by trying to keep everyone happy and ended up keeping no one. Through Aunt Margaret, I learned what happened to the rest of them. Karen was living with her sister Deborah now. Richard had asked her to move out a month after the verdict. Their marriage didn't survive the exposure of what she'd done. She attended mandatory financial counseling every week and wore an ankle monitor for probation check-ins. Deborah's Facebook posts had gone quiet. Hard to play the victim when there's a court record proving otherwise. Emily sold her car to start making restitution payments. She was working 2 jobs, retail during the day and a restaurant at night. The warehouse supervisor position she'd been bragging about disappeared when the background check flagged her felony conviction. She was 28 years old with a criminal record and $29,000 in debt. Margaret heard she was seeing a therapist, working through things she'd never been forced to face before. Whether it was helping, no one knew. Richard rattled around alone in the house on Maple Ridge Drive. The house that was supposed to be full of family now held only him and his regrets. He didn't contest the divorce Karen filed. He didn't fight for anything. A man who spent his whole life avoiding conflict was now surrounded by the wreckage of everything he'd refused to confront. I didn't feel joy at their suffering. I didn't feel guilt either. They made their choices. Choices have consequences. My only job now was to live my own life well. My phone buzzed with a text from Aunt Margaret. "Brunch Sunday? Frank's still in town? We want to celebrate your new place." I smiled and typed back, "I'll bring the champagne." Sunday brunches with Margaret had become tradition over the past 3 months. Uncle Frank had extended his trip twice, reluctant to leave. He was talking about relocating to Charlotte, moving closer to the family he should have been closer to all along. Catherine's side of the family, once cut off by Karen's manipulations, was reassembling around me. Cousins I barely remembered had reached out. A second cousin named Laura drove down from Virginia last month just to meet me. "Your mom was my favorite aunt," she said over coffee. "You look just like her." I had cried then, not from sadness but from the strange joy of being seen, of being connected to something larger than the family that had tried to erase me. I picked up the framed photo of my mother, wrapped it carefully in tissue paper, and placed it in the box marked "Living Room Important." She smiled up at me from behind the glass, young and healthy, before the diagnosis, before everything changed. I touched the pearl necklace at my throat, the one I wore every day now. It wasn't armor anymore. It was identity, a reminder of where I came from and who I belonged to. "I did it, Mom," I whispered to her photograph. "I protected our name. I hope you're proud." The room was silent, but I felt something. Warmth, presence, peace. The next morning I stood in the doorway of my new townhouse, keys in hand, sunlight streaming through windows onto empty hardwood floors. 2 bedrooms, a small office, a kitchen with good light, a backyard just big enough for a garden. My mother had loved gardens. Maybe I would learn to grow things too. The first thing I unpacked was a small framed print I had bought the week before. I hung it in the living room where I would see it every day. "Home is where you tell the truth and are still wanted." That felt right. That felt like everything I had fought for. Standing in my own space, bought with my own money and my mother's recovered gift, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. No one else's name was on the deed. No one else's expectations hung on the walls. Just me. Finally home. That evening I sat on the floor of my empty living room, takeout beside me, back against the wall. No furniture yet, just me and the quiet and the satisfaction of something earned. I looked at my phone, at the empty spaces in my contacts where Karen and Emily and Richard used to be. Some people will ask why I didn't just forgive them. Why I had to make it legal, public, permanent. They'll say family should stick together. They'll say I should have been the bigger person. But being the bigger person doesn't mean being the smaller target. Family should stick together. But first, they should stop stabbing each other. I gave them 23 years of chances. What I took back was my name, my money, and my right to exist without being used. I don't hate them. Hate would mean they still have power over me. What I feel is simpler and harder. I feel free. They called me ungrateful for wanting what was mine. They called me cruel for telling the truth. They called me selfish for having boundaries. But I learned something that Christmas when my father closed the door in my face. The people who punish you for protecting yourself were never your people. And the people who are your people, they're not behind you waiting for you to fail. They're beside you, or they're still out there, waiting to be found. I found mine. I hope you find yours too. If this story found you tonight, if you've ever been the one kicked out of the room for existing, if you've ever had your kindness mistaken for weakness or your patience mistaken for permission, if you've ever wondered whether you're crazy for wanting to be treated like you matter, you're not crazy, you're not alone, and you're not wrong for wanting more. I'd love to hear your story, the one you've never told, the one that's still burning inside you. Leave a comment below. Share this with someone who needs to hear that fighting back is possible. And if you want more stories like this, real stories, hard stories, stories where the truth finally wins, hit that subscribe button and stay with us. Because sometimes the only family you need is the one that finds you in the comments. You're not alone at the table. You are the table.